So how should you approach Baden Hall's quarry pool? Well, one thing you've got to remember in this lake, most of the fish are huge. At the last count, I've been through the book, been through the Facebook page, there's over 60, maybe even 70 30 pounders in the lake at the moment, and almost half of those are over 35 pound. You've got 8 to 9 40s, a couple of fish that go 50 at certain times of the year. So one thing you've got to remember when you come down here is to tackle up safely. You know, use quite heavy line when you come down here. There's no real long casting anywhere, so it's much better to have line on that's definitely not going to let you down. Make sure your end tackle is up to the job. Use what you're confident with when you're fishing what can sometimes be quite a weedy lake, but even if it isn't weedy, these fish are big and they pull really hard. A great tip when you come down here on the quarry is to watch the wildlife. We're in a beautiful part of Staffordshire here, and there are all kinds of bird life here, and the bird life are often a great indicator of what the fish are up to. The swifts and the swallows feeding on the fly hatches means a good time to try zigs. If you see the geese and the swans diving down and feeding on top of the weed, it's a good time to try something like a naked chod, because there'll be a lot of snails around. Try that, it's worth a go. So let's talk about how to approach the quarry at different times of year. As you're coming out of winter, it's not famed for its winter form, and coming out of the spring is a really good time to try and catch some big fish. Now the way you're going to catch them is up in the water on zigs. I'd start within 2 feet of the surface. Blacks, reds, your dull dark colours seem to work well. What you'll notice here in the spring, there are a lot of fly hatches, and the fish really do get on them like a big shoal of trout sometimes. You'll also catch a lot of fish on single hook baits. Now for me personally, this is one of the best ways to approach the spring on here. If you see a fish show, put a hook bait in the rings of the fish with a hook bait you're confident with, a rig that you know will be presented. Now that could be a long hinge rig, something that's going to settle down nicely over the top of any weed or detritus that might be there, or a chod rig. You can fish that either on lead core, or as I prefer, a naked chod. Both of those tactics absolutely awesome in the spring. It's not that they don't get their heads down on bait, because they can do at times. Little PVA bag traps though seem to catch much bigger fish more often than filling it in at the start of the year. So for the spring, go softly, try and get on the fish, and it's the best way of picking out them real big boys. Now summer at Baden Hall, you can split almost into 2 seasons. As you're coming into June, the fish are normally in a spawning limbo. The weed can be quite high at that time of year, and the fishing becomes quite difficult. Surface fishing still an important tactic. Zigs still play their part, but what you're going to do is get some fish getting their heads down on those nice clear spots. They're hard to find, but you find that nice soft sand, it feels like glass through the marker rod. You find that, and you can get a bit of bait in and get a few fish competing. Now as we come into July and August, things change. All of a sudden the weeds dying back, the water clarity changes, it goes a little bit murkier sometimes, you get a bit of an algae bloom, and that's the time you can come down here with your favourite mix of bait, whether that be a big mix of particles, pellets, naturals, it really doesn't matter. You can get their heads down if you're on the fish and you find a good little spot in their patrol route. Watch the fish. You know, when you get here, there's no rush to get the rods out. I always spend maybe an hour, 2 hours just sitting in my swim, watching the water, trying to figure out the patrol route. And once you've found it, you can have some amazing sessions. You know, some really big hits down here at Baden Hall. Most of them only in 24-hour sessions as well. You don't need all week to catch numbers of fish down here. That's my advice for the summer. Take it or leave it. Autumn can be a really special time at Baden. The fish are looking great, they've recovered from spawning. You know, a lot of fish will go quite a few months without getting caught. They look magnificent, and those big boys really do. They start to darken off, to go really brown in colour, almost chestnut, and they look awesome when you get them on the bank. Now, this time of year, boilies really do play a big part. A big spread of boilies with the throwing stick, big boilies too, can really pay off if you're on a shoal of fish. Another way of nicking a lot of bites in the autumn. You've got to imagine these fish are seeing a lot of pressure by the time September, October comes, is fishing with very high attract, solid PVA bags. Put everything in the bag, you know, fill it full of real high attract stuff. It really doesn't matter, load it with liquids, oils, anything that you know fish love. Those solid bags, just put out there in amongst a dying weed or a nice little silty sandy spot, can catch you some real monsters. Well, in the winter down here, I can't say I've done a lot of winter fishing on the quarry. It can be very, very tricky, but the rewards are there, and numerous lake records have been broken in the winter, especially around December, January time, if we get some big winds, low pressure, and nice mild evenings. Again, boilies play a big role, but so do natural baits, and you can never discount zig rig fishing down here. In the winter, I know some lads who've had some fantastic results by just finding the depth of water that those fish are lying in. If you find the depth, make sure you get down here regular, because you can have some really, really special fish even in the coldest of conditions. "18 swims down here at Baden Hall, and all of them give you a great slice of water to try and catch one of those absolute monsters. There's no real one swim that dominates down here. That tends to change with the seasons, and of course it changes with the prevailing wind. So I'm going to talk about wind direction and how it should influence your peg choice, because quite often you're making a peg choice here because the lake's busy without actually going down and seeing the lake. So I'm going to break it down into the different wind directions to give you a bit of a head start on where those fish might be. Of course, it's good to keep in touch with other anglers who might be fishing the lake, and it's always good to speak to the guys in the tackle shop and ask them what's been going on, where have the fish been being seen. These guys live down here, they know the lakes like the back of their hand. Don't just go in, pay your money and say, I'm on the quarry. Be a human being, have a chin wag. You know, ask all the daft questions. I still do it now. I'll come down and I ask some really stupid questions because I really want to know where the fish are before I pick my peg. But of course, those wind directions on these big sort of sandy gravel pits make a massive difference. So if you've got a northwesterly, the northwesterly is probably my favourite wind at Baden Hall. It pushes straight down into the bay. So that's pegs 17 and 18. But you've got to remember that there'll be fish knocking around on the outside of the bay as well. So pegs 1, 2 and 3 are great on a northwesterly, and so are the pegs opposite in 14, 15 and 16. A big straight westerly, everything changes. Peg 14 can be very good, peg 13 can be very good, peg 12, peg 11, but also on the back of the wind you've got a bit of a sort of backwash going on all of the time. There's a big sort of shallow ridge that runs down the middle of the lake, and you get a lot of undertow off of that, which is why pegs 5 and 6 can also fish extremely well on a big westerly. And then a big southerly, wow, it's blowing straight down into 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10, and that bank can be absolutely full of fish on a big southerly. There's lots of different swims down here and they give you so many different options. You've got lots and lots of features out there. Have a good lead around with the marker float. See if you can find some nice clear sandy bottom, silty sort of lake beds. What you're looking for, that's the one. Well, behind me you've got the bay, and there are a number of great features in the bay. There's an island that the fish can get in either side, and then just down here behind me you've got a little inlet stream. So when it rains really heavy, that really colours the water up and pumps a lot of natural food into the lake. And of course you've got those margins left and right. Be cautious, be stealthy, and the bay can really pay off.